We'll now call the joint the county. We'll start here with roll call on the city side. Ryan, if you'd note the roll.
Roll is noted.
We need to note the roll on the county side.
We have all members in attendance.
Perfect.
Wonderful.
Invitation for citizens to schedule a time on the commission agenda for an item not listed. Anybody got anything they want to add? Seeing nobody's here. Approval of agenda. Is there a motion for approval on the county side?
Move approval.
Motion Bartley. Second Troyan, all in favor? Aye. Motion passes.
On the city side, we will not have a quorum tonight, so we'll limit our involvement to the discussion items and no action items.
We'll move on to approval of minutes on the county side. Is there a motion? Motion by Troyan. Second by Diedrich. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Same thing on the county there, so. Moving on to agenda item 5, discussion and review of the draft from First District updating joint jurisdiction ordinance. What you got for us, Luke?
All right. And good evening. Thanks for meeting with me. You made the point. I made the point. It was a poor week for me to choose to schedule meetings in Siston, Millbank, and 2 in Brookings with gas doing what it's doing right now. So I'm happy to have this one, and we'll be done for the. Everyone, you know me. I'm Luke. Going through, this is our 8th meeting on this thing. Today we're going to talk about concentrated animal feeding operations, regulations as far as they were adopted, or not adopted, as far as they were recommended through the subcommittee going on a couple of years ago now. And then if time allows, and we can knock off gravel pits as well off that list and not have to come back in the end of the month, we may do that. We will see as time allows here. So today, I'm going to go through, I was half counting on having more city planning commission members so that I would explain what some of this stuff is, but I do think it's relevant here for everybody's sake, just kind of get their frame of reference here, so I'll go really quick. I'll do somewhat quick here. First time I did this in City of Watertown, one of my favorite statements that I got from the chairperson of the Planning Commission in Watertown, I think I can say that, I doubt Pat's watching here, was he looked over at the chairperson and he said, what are COFAs and why are they so bad? And he said, you mean CAFOs? And he said, yeah, whatever they are. He said, it seems like that's everything everyone wants to talk about. So go through and what are they? Just to educate each other here real quick. I'm not going to spend a ton of time here. Holy cow, there is a lot of difference. My whole thing got a little bit disjointed here. So I might have to go through here real quick. The concentrated animal feeding operations are, well, let's talk about the pros and cons. Why do we have to have them? Why are they out there, right? They are, I just wanted to have I had something very witty and smart I wanted to have on here. Sorry, everyone. There we go. What are they? They're a feedlot. That's basically what it is, okay? We have pros and cons for them, of course. It allows opportunity for residents to move out of town without buying 30 foot. That's the wrong page. That's why that's all messed up. They're a lot or a corral building or other area where 10 or more animals have been, are, or will be stabled, confined for a total of 45 days or more during any 12-month period, and where crops, vegetation, forage, post-harvest residue are not sustained over any over portion of the lot. What's that mean? First part, the very first thing that I want to draw your attention to is 10 or more animals. That was a discussion and a point, and that was a fine discussion that was finished by that subcommittee group that that was the number that they were going to go with. 10 animals, okay? So that's the number that they wanted to say is the number of animals makes a CAFO, the lowest level of CAFO. Anything below that is standard ag. Somebody can have that. The other portions of that is that they're going to be in an area, so this doesn't count pastures. They're going to be in an area where they're grazing it down or stomping it down to dirt. And they're going to be there for over 45 days during a calendar year, okay? So it doesn't mean the same cow is there for 45 days. It means cows are there for 45 days. So there are your numbers. So then ultimately what happened there is then we went through and just adjusted the numbers to get to that point. And I realized I went backwards on some of my math here, but we adjusted the numbers to get to that point. And I just in my table here, I've got to update those. But the main one that I want to draw your attention to, 10 animals, or 10 animals is 10 animals. We're going to get to what is a Class E versus a Class something or other here in just a second here.
Luke, one
Yeah.
maybe clarification form, that just may want to clarify that. Is that consecutive days or 45 days total during the calendar year?
Should be days is what that is.
They have to be confined in one spot for 45 days or if
Yep.
they're there for 30 days and out for 2 months and back in there for
Right,
another 20 days, that would not be considered a CAFO.
right. Okay. I had to go back and forth on this. The number to get above and be an actual CAFO in the joint jurisdiction draft that you have is actually 10 animals. Yeah. 10 livestock animals, sorry. Yeah, it would be. It would be. So that would count 10 check-ins and you're fine. Actually, 9. 10-year CAFO. 9, you're fine. 10-year CAFO. No. Well, yes, that would be right. Yep, that would be right. See, here's the deal. I went through and I updated this because the question you have right now was in my mind. And I was like, well, that's not right. So I went back and I updated this table to account for the animal units, and I screwed up. And I rather than doing the number of animals, I have animal units on this table here. So that bottom number, you're going to need to multiply 10 times that bottom number, and that's going to be it. Bottom line is, you're talking about the same number of horses all the way across the board is what was decided. People could have up to 10 horses and be allowed. That's how I remember it from there, because that's what the draft said at the time. Once they go up there, then they're animal units. Once they go above that.
So if we have a horse boarding or horse stable, would that kick them into the CAFO classification?
It's both, yep.
So they have to,
It's both. It's both a stable and a CAFO. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Next, Michael.
Has joined.
So why do we have the animal unit equivalency in there if we're actually just counting the animals?
Because the moment we get past 10, we're counting animal equivalencies.
So it's just for the first one for E?
Yep, that's the only time it's relevant is the 10 animals. What the intent here is that we wind up having the top end, bottom end of each deal here. I go back and update this table. I had thought I was doing you a solid by updating this number, and in fact I just messed up that bottom number. So the bottom line is you are going to have the animal units are, it's 10 cattle, it's 14, it would be 7, sorry, it would be 10 dairy cattle in theory as well. 10 all the way across, it's just that's a number of animal units. It's a different number of animal units. So the animal equivalency ratio is irrelevant at the bottom of the Class E, is what I'm trying to say.
Is this chart going to be in the ordinance?
It was fixed before this morning, and I thought I was smarter than what you guys had done. And then I went, and then when Mr. Gatsky started bringing it up, I went, that is not right at all after I looked at it. So my apologies for switching what you guys had worked on for 2 years. Yep. Yep. Yeah, and don't forget, we're not prohibiting them either. So, all it means is that they're being regulated. They're being regulated as a CAFO versus just somebody who's got some animals out there. Okay. Let's get into this a little bit. So, I always approach things and recommend that you approach them from the way that I was taught geography in graduate school, which is what is where, why, there, and why do we care. In this case, where are they? This map here has a lot going on it. But basically, this is from 2018, land use survey as we're doing the process here. And we went with different symbols to indicate what sort of animal it was. Went different size and color of circle to indicate how many were on there. These, of course, were estimates. We did not go out and count tags and that sort of thing. These were estimates, and honestly, it's relatively easy to tell. And I'm not going to lie, we estimated on the high side as much as we could on a lot of them. So basically, there are your numbers there. The purple ones would be anything from 200 to 500. And tell you that one on the north was pretty close to 5 there. But they've also got some other operations there, some 0 to 10. But the other part I want you to look at is the count, the number of incidences of cattle, horses, sheep, swine, and others. Others were usually goats or poultry. 46 places with cattle. You can see that vast range there with an average of 95 cattle. Horses, you had 36 places with horses. Average was 9. And so that kind of gives you the idea. But I will tell you the vast majority of them were closer to 5 is what the vast majority was. Now, when we did this, I don't believe they had that stable, I think was either just permitted or else they were inside. I don't recall. But I don't think we have that on here shown. But at any rate, that just for what it's worth.
The one by the bypass.
Yeah. I can't remember. It was winter of 2018. Either way,
Yeah.
bottom line is you have a stable out
Yep.
there. That's not
That would have been permitted because that's been changed over twice
Yeah.
since that was originally back into being used.
So you can see what your breakdown is as far as the numbers of operations. There was there's a good sized hog lot out there. I do recall that. But at any rate, that just kind of shows you the distribution of what you've got. Notice how you've got the smaller ones, several smaller ones closer to town or over the shallow aquifer. Why are they where they are at? Well, don't forget the Brookings County Land Use Plan supports a diverse ag economy that includes converting some of the crops grown in the county to delicious, tasty, animal-based protein known as meat, milk, eggs, etc. There might be some editorializing there, but that's part of what the land use plan goal is to sell our crops in different ways, and that's by selling animals and converting it. So you're talking about the county-wide plan there, and that's been the case since before there was zoning or plans. That's been the intent. You do have numerous hobby farms on the fringe of town with animals that have a literal homegrown source for certain food products. And then you also have other hobby farms keeping livestock close to town. So basically, that's kind of explaining why you've got smaller ones there. But the other reason is because you got a lot of, the other farms that are out there they were there before. Why are they? Several operations are generations old, and they could be frankly, there could be many more operations, but many have gone out. So as few as you have, there could be many more. Larger operations need to be near good roads and water sources, so that's why you're kind of limited because those happen to be really good places for houses too. And then the size of the operation is limited by the aquifer floodplain, how close they are to town, and how close they are to houses, of course, wells, what have you. So that's why you've got limitations on the size and what have you, and where they're at, and that's existing ordinances as well. Why do we care? I mean, we got pros, you know, it's supported by the land use plan, as long as they're appropriately cited. Let's face it, it's put together, don't forget, the county's land use plan is written from the standpoint that farming is economic development. The economic development tool, the industry that it is designed around, is the protection of the existing business, which is a farm in the county. And so that's why they're out there. And that's why, honestly, they should be. They're a use that can be operated on a large plot of land and reserve areas for future municipal growth as well. Don't forget, it takes a lot of area to do so. So again, you're not having a whole bunch of 500 head feedlots stacked in the same quarter section. It takes a large area. The cons are that a negligent operation can cause pollution problems. It's true. Negligent operators can. There's also a clash of expectations of residents outside the city, and frankly, sometimes inside, as far as what they expect to see, smell, hear, what have you, as they go out there. And frankly, the more people that are out there, the more potential clashes you have. When the municipality grows to the CAFO, it creates an island where the city's land use plan and the uses clash with present uses. I mean, we can all remember when we had the farm right on the edge where you now have Walmart right next to Perkins, right, for years. I mean, you have this use right next to it. We all know, if you've been to Watertown, you know where Culver's is at, right next to the feedlot. And now that's kind of gone by the wayside, but over time it does create a pimple as you grow to it. So that is some of the cons. And we got to look them in the mirror. So how does the draft allow them? So permitted uses. A permitted use would be any Class E concentrated animal feeding operation that is not over the shallow aquifer and it's subject to the setbacks in the table, okay? Again, 10 animals up to 499 animal units, okay? And just for what it's worth, I'm sorry, I kind of glazed over that for the couple that don't deal with animal units every day. Animal equivalency ratio is based on the waste output of the animals, what it amounts to, so that's why the numbers are different. And it's the animal equivalency number that you would see out up here. It's just that they don't call it that anymore. They just use specifically the numbers and go from there. This also lists conditional uses from 500 to 999 animal units for something that's not over the shallow aquifer, or 10 to a cap of 499 to something that is over the shallow aquifer. And again, they're subject to the table and conditions. And any prohibited uses would be Class A and B, which are not even referenced, other than just to say they're prohibited. Any CAFO over the wellhead protection district as well is prohibited. So there's your tier down there as far as that. So what that means is that what that group had recommended was that the cap is 999 in this area, in the joint jurisdiction area. The next slide indicates the table as far as what setbacks, and if I recall, these are shrunk in quite a bit, aren't they? Now I think they're widened, I should say. Quarter of a mile for a Class E, or an existing Class C, a new Class C, which is 500 to 1,000. Sorry, 500 to 999 over. Not over the shallow aquifer, sorry, would be a half mile from a house. From the city limits of Brookings, it was shown, agreed or recommended by the group to be for a new Class C, to be 15,840 feet. Or as prescribed, you see that table, we'll get there in a minute. 1 mile for a new Class D or E, which means that you're talking about someone who wants to have more than 10 animals, would need to be more than a mile from the city. And then a half a mile for anything existing, and that's That's essentially, if you're within that, there's an exemption there that you can build as long as you're farther away. I'll get there in a second here. This just kind of is the further breakdown here. If you want to go back to that table, we can, but the rest of these rules pretty well mirror what's in the county below that.
Luke, just
Yeah.
a question.
Yeah,
A lot of folks have grazing animals. They don't count as part of this.
right. Grazing wouldn't because they're not grazing it down to the dirt.
Right.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure.
Yep. Yeah, and the other thing that people will often ask, what if they let them out on corn stalks, something like that? No, there's post-harvest residue unless they graze that completely gone. There's some caveats in here, and that is section right after. I just regret that these were really small. One, 2 or more CAFOs that are under common ownership and within 1 mile of each other are considered one for the purposes of setbacks, numbers, what have you. And so that, for what it's worth, just that they would be combined. The second one is an exemption. Is that right? No, this is the caveats here. Established residences don't include any residence established after May 13th, 1997, which is when the county's most recent CAFO rules were put into place. Any residence that was established less than a half mile from any concentrated animal feeding operation, essentially saying you've got dibs if the feedlot was there before the house. The board may allow a setback of less than minimum required with a written waiver, and we'll get to that again. The Board of Adjustment may utilize an increase or decrease the required setback if, again, using those exemptions. And then it has a definition of what a well is. It's number 5 is a reference as far as the definition of a well. That's any well in use in the calendar year prior to the applicant making a permit, is what that would be. The exemptions to the setbacks would be conforming additions to a non-conforming feedlot as long as it doesn't jump a class size. So if the existing barn is 2,000 feet away from a house, but they're going to throw another barn 650 feet farther, so it's going to meet the required setback, then it's okay. They don't have to come in and ask for a variance for what's already there. The other exemption is if they have a waiver from the landowner or well owner benefiting from the setback. Landowner says, yeah, I'm cool with you making this change. We don't have to ask for a variance. Same thing would be true if there's a waiver from the municipality of Brookings. Say there is something, I don't know what it would be, says that we are perfectly fine with this feedlot going in less than 3 miles from us. That would be a council action, though, is what it would be. It wouldn't be a planning commission. It'd be a council action authorizing the mayor to sign that waiver, which would be a referable action if someone didn't like that idea. And then the last one is dibs, which is easier for me to say than, and frankly, I just like to because I love that we have a state law that requires dibs, which is if you had a feedlot there first and the house comes in later, the feedlot has dibs. They get to expand because the house came later. Other
Luke?
requirements or conditions, yeah.
Just a question on the well, if they might want to, whether it's for the livestock or if they're using it for potable water for the house, make any difference on that?
That one was, I believe the way that was defined, and I'd have to double check, but I believe the way that was defined was any well, though. I think that was any well.
Any well.
I think so.
Okay.
Because we had that talk at the county planning commission as to how you did it, how they wanted to do it, and we just carried that forward because I kind of figured that the city wouldn't want to be less restrictive than the county on that. So
What bearing does the right to farm covenant have on anything out there if one of them's been signed?
as much as anything, the right to farm covenant for CAFOs is more of an acknowledgement that this sort of thing happens, and it probably has more to do with the manure application. What you're more apt to have is the literal setback you have. Well, yeah, the waiver or what have you when somebody builds a house less than a half a mile from a feedlot, as much as anything is what has more bearing on that. But it doesn't. Not to say that egg waiver doesn't carry some clout too. But that's what it is. It's as much as anything an acknowledgement when they build a house saying, hey, I'm living somewhere that may be dusty, dirty, or smelly because people farm and work out hours.
Luke,
Yeah.
on the well, which, because we've had all that litigation on wells, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's actually written the way it is on this, on the caveats there, but it's not clear. You said it's the calendar year before, and this says 365 days before. Those are two different things.
I'm
and-
sorry, I did say that wrong. Yeah, it's 365 January. You're right.
Okay,
It should be 365 days prior to the application. Yeah.
okay. And then past the first draft on the Ag Committee, I'm just curious, everybody thought that 1 year was anything, if the well had not been used for longer than 1 year, that was a long enough period? That seems like a short period to me. There are cases where you might not use your well this year, but you will use it. You maybe did use it 2 years ago, and you'll be using it again next year. But I just bring that up for conversation. That just seems
Yeah.
like a short period to me.
It's a good point. We're how many years away from that discussion we had,
Right.
Leon? You know,
Exactly.
but I think, as I remember that, what the idea was that all wells. So it was opening them up, but they had to have been used within the year, assuming that more than likely would be a residential user that was more than likely using it within the year, because otherwise it's just got to meet the stock watering requirements of the state. I mean, I think that's where it came from, but again, 5 years ago, I don't know.
I'm just asking our ag people if you're all comfortable with that 1 year. That's what you all think is reasonable.
Is measured from any well that's been used within a year of
Within
the
1
application.
year.
Yeah, yeah. They could go back and use it. It's
We've had
There's feet.
instances of CAFOs going back at, said it was a well back there since 1909, and that's their use. This would take it back to 1 year of use, or 365 days of use.
yeah.
That
Yeah.
might be a little too far on the pendulum swing. I'm just asking if everybody's comfortable with that.
I'm comfortable with it.
Okay.
Want me to move on? Okay. The other requirements, these are obviously I've reordered how this goes, but the other requirements outside of it, they have to comply with Department of Ag and Natural Resource environmental rules, meaning that they can't pollute. The zoning officer or board of adjustment, depending on which permit or size they are, does have discretion to require a state general permit if deemed warranted. Typically, that's going to be, at the size we're talking less than 1,000. Typically, that's probably going to be a certificate of compliance, not a state general permit. I take that back. No, you can request a state general permit. I apologize for that. New Class C operations have different requirements. And the first thing I want you to keep in mind is that new doesn't necessarily mean it was a pasture and a blank piece of farmland before. New means wasn't over 500 before, and now it will be. Okay? So that does mean an expansion of an existing lot as well. They obviously have to meet the setbacks of the 500, as well as provide a nutrient management plan, manure management and operation plan, fly and odor plan, and identification of haul roads, as well as potential agreement if, depending on how the board feels about that. For those that don't deal with these on a day-to-day basis, manure management and operation plan is how you handle the manure on the site. Once it leaves the site, it's considered nutrient. So that's the nutrient management plan is when it leaves the site, how it's being applied on the ground. So that was one of the things I had to teach myself as a kid who grew crops and not critters on our farm. Manure application may be required to be incorporated by the Board of Adjustment. Not literally the Board of Adjustment going out and shoveling stuff on there, but they can require it to be incorporated. They must have enough land to spread manure on in order to get the permit. So if they only have land enough for 300 animal units, then they only get 300 animal units on the property. And there's a list of minimum things they need to put for their application. So that is a summary, and we can go to the draft if you want to. But yeah,
Can you add goats to the category of animals? Because Brookings County happens to be rapidly growing with goats.
I will tell you this, typically, and we can just throw it in with sheep
Well, I
because
just-
typically it's under sheep.
It is, but I'm just
Yeah.
seeing an increase
Yeah,
in
that's
my
a good point.
business with milking goats.
Yeah, let me do that because I do recall a couple of applications you guys have had too.
Yeah, it's just one of the demographic changes in our country.
Good point. Where is that?
Llamas? Well, yeah, I don't know anything about exotic. Emus?
Goats?
Oh, like fainting.
Milking goats.
Well, there's a big difference in size. I mean, we rent out, our facility to goats,
Okay.
so.
Yeah, I'll double check that those numbers are right, but I believe they're typically the same as sheep. So,
Where it says must have enough land to spread manure on, they can't have agreements with other land.
that can include agreements.
Okay.
We own it.
All right.
So,
Well, it is if it's over 1,000. Yeah, it is if it's over 1,000, but you're not going to allow any over 1,000. So, I mean, they're going to have it, and if you get a complaint on it, you're going to have to tell them, all right, where are your acres at, and you're going to have to go out and check on it. If that's the case.
That would be part of the applicant permit application.
Yeah.
Have the map and the nutrient spreading agreements with those parties involved.
Mhm.
They are kept on file in the county development office.
But they don't have to own the land. That's what I
They
wanted
do
to
Right,
not have to
clear up.
own the land. They
They can have agreements.
As long as it's an agreement. Yeah.
They do not have to own the land, and if that agreement is notarized, it stays with the land, not the landowner.
So yeah,
So
if it's
if it's
sold,
sold, if I have an easement to spread manure on your land and you sell it, I still have the easement to spread manure on your land with the new landowner. Doesn't anymore? That's the way it did when we built our barn.
Right.
yeah, we get updates on that all the time in the office when that's happening.
And generally, these applications have at least 2/3, if not double, the amount of acres that they have. So they have flexibility and adequate acres because you cannot put the manure on the same land for the same year after year. You have to rotate that off for your nutrient management or fertilizer tests, and that goes according to that. So.
Yeah, I mean, so this was basically just, the intent here was just, this is what is. This is what's in it, aside from where I screwed up the table. Sorry about that. Now it's, throw darts. I mean, good, bad, ugly, where are you at? Before you do, I'll give you one point that would be a logical point. Luke, why do we still reference Class A and B if we don't allow them anyway? And the answer is that this is largely going to be administered by the county zoning office. And rather than have a separate A and a B and a C for the joint jurisdiction versus in the rest of the county, just kept the classifications the same. So it's C, D, and E, and there just are no A, B in that area. So that's how that was listed.
Ready for comments? Basically, as I look at this, Luke, I think we've, other than a few minor changes you want to update to this in the final draft, I think it's ready for a final draft because we will still have public hearings where if there's any real objections out there in the county, we'll have to address them at that time. And I'm not waiting for a perfect document because there isn't one available anywhere. I want this document to move forward. So I think at this point, unless there's some objections, with the small changes you suggested today, I'm fine with publishing this. I can go forward to the public hearing.
The only, I want to give you a heads up just because you talked about stables, okay? Just keep in mind, there are certain uses that may make some sense in the joint jurisdiction area that aren't just feedlots. And so I just want you I wouldn't be doing my job as to advise you that there could be someone who wants to have, say, an auction yard or something like that, or maybe even a processing or something like that in that area that implicitly is going to have a CAFO as a component of it, but logic is going to say it's going to be right on the fringe of town. So that would mean that you're talking about a variance or a request, but to the municipality to waive that setback. So just be advised of that's, if somebody's out there looking at that cross-eyed, hey man, they're right. It is you're going to have to ask the city for permission to do that on the fringe. So.
And that would come into effect with the stable we have permitted right now. City limits is right across the street to the west.
Yeah, so that's I guess my point is that when you're talking about something over, you get over those 10 animals, then they're gonna have to figure
Even if
something out.
it's 30 or 40, I forget what it's permitted at right now, but that would kick in that setback, so you would need the blessing from the city and the
Yeah.
mayor for that to
Yeah.
continue in operation.
Was that one like a sunset? Did that one have a sunset where it expired?
Yes, it's temporary. It's coming up either this year or next year.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the reason for that was multiple owners running the place or multiple renters renting the place. And so we wanted to make sure we had control if it was a bad renter.
You guys talking about that?
Yes. Press my house. Right now it's functioning great.
Oh, there's some folks looking at a vet facility for equine here
Yep.
within the joint jurisdiction area. Probably 5 years before the building. They bought the land.
Yeah, and I mean, I would doubt that they'd reach a point where they'd be
They wouldn't have
on there all the time.
Well, it
Yeah.
would be a good feeding lot.
right. It's
Would
a
be a
high-
feed lot.
Right.
Yeah.
High risk animal surgery.
Yeah.
It's actually a really neat specialty to have.
It would be different if they had to monitor, say, 12 of them in an open lot out back versus treating them, maybe it's a day or two at a time. So
They'll be indoors most of them.
So 4-H grounds, where are they now? We start thinking about that.
Aren't they? Well, they got the horse arena out there for the show.
They just use the building.
Right. They use a Swiftel for the building, so they don't have any
Just outside
outside
there's no
grounds.
4-H there.
Right. Well, the county did. They're housed out there. The county houses them out there. They have an agreement with the city and the Swiftel Center to use that for their shows and their animal events. Yep.
Oh, yeah.
okay. Well, if there are no more comments on that, Richard, do you want to talk about gravel pits?
Yeah, I can highlight that. That was vetted with the subcommittees, with the joint city and planning committees prior to this, and they had a subcommittee that worked on this, and they come up with this set of standards and rules, and that's what we've been using for permitting gravel pits and crushing that have been permitted since that time here in the joint area and out in the county. So I think they've done a good job on it, and it's pretty well vetted. So that's they went through and the subcommittee dealt with some of the contractors, and around here this is what they come up with. So, did you have anything else to add, Mike?
No, I was just going to mention that, and you kind of touched on it, is that subcommittee did go and and worked through it with them. And then made a lot of reference to the state regulations on some things, and they felt pretty comfortable with it. They sent it back to the full joint committee that was working on the draft ordinance, and they supported that recommendation from that subcommittee. So comfort level moving forward with the ordinance.
Can you just tell us what requirements are?
I'm going to leave it up to you, Richard.
They'd have to be on, to have a bond and their reclamation plan on file, and that needs to be adhered to that for that when it gets done. With the manning is completed or they continue to cease operation, they have to return it back to what that is like.
One of the things with the reclamation is that the state does have a law that says that you can't duplicitous require a bond for reclamation as well, because they require a bond. And so that's why oftentimes you'll see places do like you've been doing a lot, which is shorter term permits on the fringe of town, or they will say no more than a certain amount of land open at a time. And that can all be handled as a part of the permit at the time as they do it. But yeah, that was in a lot of the rules before that they just require a bond and there we go. But that wasn't legal. So anything else you want me to fly to on this thing?
Doesn't sound like it.
All right.
So our next steps then, Luke, if we've pretty much covered it jointly with the city, what's our next step? You get to put this whole thing together and send it out to us?
Yep, that's the plan. Is that next step will be for me to put together the updates, which I've been doing them meeting by meeting, which is new for me. So I'm pretty much left to just what we did today, and then sending that out to you. I'd like to give you a full month, really, just to look at it again. I mean, but we are at March 3rd. The only thing is, I'll be honest, part of what I was planning was to roll this all together because I am gone next week. Reality is I was still figuring that we'd probably have one more meeting at your April meeting to, if there are any, that'll be too early, won't it? You won't have time to go all the way through it in that time, will you? When do you want to meet again on this?
We've scheduled the next meeting for March 29th at 5:30.
Yeah, I mean, but that was also for the purposes of talking about gravel pits.
Right. It'd be up to you if you can get things prepared and out.
Prepared now, and we could basically go to the first public hearing, can't we?
As long as you guys there weren't anything else that you guys were interested in. And I think we're going to have to, yeah, well, we got to have one more meeting, make sure that everyone's on board or everyone's where they thought it was. And then, yeah, then it's public hearings is what it is. I think there's probably one more discussion meeting with the whole group, then we do public hearings. Or do you see it differently?
I myself, before I'd like to say we're ready to go to public hearing, I'd like to see the document and have a conversation if there needs to be any changes in it. But that's just me. I'd like to actually read it.
I guess I look at timing. If you get the document out to us and anybody, if we leave the April 29th meeting on for right now, if we get the document out, or March 29th meeting on the schedule, if anybody has an objection or has a question, have the meeting. If we don't have the meeting, or we move it to public hearing directly after that. If we have the meeting, then we'll obviously have changes we want to review again. And so do we have to get together if nobody has any objections? If you have an objection, you need to tell your chairman. Or you need to tell Richard, or you need to tell Mike. As
Meet if
presented.
needed is what you're saying.
Yeah, is a meeting needed if there are no objections? Or no changes, or no questions on it? I'm being really optimistic here.
When you say objections, though, is that including 100% of the entire document or just what we talked about tonight?
The whole document.
That'd be the whole thing.
My
It's gonna be the whole
objections
thing.
is on the residential issues from last time that I discussed. That would be my biggest objections.
Those were being removed, weren't they?
Yeah, that was that section that was gonna be removed.
Yeah,
And
that's
discussed
my only-
afterwards.
That's my only
Yeah.
objection, because I've read everything you
Yeah.
guys have had, so.
Yeah, that part was gonna be removed. Yeah. I heard words somewhere, didn't I?
So basically, run with what Mike said there and, get it out to us as soon as you can. If you still have objections, voice them and we will have a meeting the 29th. But if there's no objections heard after reading the private or the final draft at home, we will not have the meeting the 29th and go straight to the first hearing.
When do you wanna have, when's your staff hasn't heard by date, pull the plug on the meeting? What do you,
Publish it, what, 2 days ahead?
We typically try and aim for a week prior to getting the agendas out.
Still can cancel it.
You're talking for the review or for the public hearing?
For the review.
Review, okay.
Just for the review.
you're saying schedule it and we gotta pull it, we gotta pull it.
There's no reason to have the meeting. Cancel it.
And we do the public hearings before we make a recommendation? Do we?
Yes.
And then so after the public hearings, if there's something that comes about in those hearings that gets changed, then we come back as a group and look at it again? Or
one of-
how do we do that joint recommendation? How does that work?
So here's how that works. That's a very good question. So you're going to meet jointly as a planning commission and make your recommendation. If the recommendation matches, which hopefully it will, if the recommendation matches and then goes to city commission, to city and county elected bodies, then, and they decide to make a change, one of two ways it has to happen, because it's literally in state law for the counties, so you're going to have to follow it. It either has to go back and the planning commission start it over again and rehear the change that is proposed, or the two elected boards hit the timeout button and they publish a notice on that proposed change from the recommended version and hold a public hearing on that change from the recommended version before voting, is how that works. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, that the planning commissions got together after the public hearing and recommended approval of this ordinance in its entirety, and after a public hearing at the elected boards meeting jointly, it was decided to remove section 53103. And I'm only picking on that because it's right in front of me. And they said, let's get rid of 53103. Pause button, and then you decide whether or not to send it back to the planning commission or to just rehear it, have a public hearing on that, one small change, and then vote on the amendment. Robert's rules, right? Vote on the amendment, and then you vote on the document itself after the vote on the amendment.
And the vote there is the recommendation to send it to the elected boards.
No,
I
I was
just
assuming in
lost-
that case, it didn't go back to the planning commission.
Okay.
So again, you have, the elected boards have the opportunity to either A, send it back with a suggested amendment for those two boards to hear it, or B, which would then restart the process, or B, bypass them, rehear it at their level, and do it at their place. So, and the expectation there is that if the planning commission had a problem with it, the planning commission will send someone and come and speak about it, is what the expectation is. I mean, you run into cases where it's, this side doesn't like this side, but that's what the expectation is.
So at our last meeting, when we talked about the residential stuff, the comment was made that people felt that maybe the elected officials ought to figure out a way to handle that in the ordinance. And I think there may be some conversation between the commission and the city council on that. We'll see.
Mhm.
May happen, may not happen. But if that happened after the public meeting and those two entities came to an agreement, it would not come back to this group then? It would just do another public hearing? Is that what you're saying?
It depends. It depends on if that happens after the planning commission recommendation, but before the actual action. Or if the action's already happened, well, then it's a literal ordinance amendment. So then it's got to come back to both boards and we get to sit together happy and do it again. But it's only on one topic, which frankly is kind of where we left it last time,
Right.
was maybe this needs to be its own item, is where it was left last time.
And it could be, we can get this ordinance passed, because I think that one on the county side, there'll be much larger discussion outside the joint jurisdiction area than it probably is inside the joint jurisdiction area. And that needs its own hearing, so to speak, or its own workaround, so to speak, if there is one. But we have to have two public hearings or one? We have to have one and then a second one?
Yeah, all boards have to have
Two.
a public hearing,
Right.
is what it amounts to. So the planning commissions have to have a public hearing and the elected boards have to have a public hearing. You could all meet together, all four of you, in one big happy, family reunion, Brady Bunch reunion, but I know that it's, I guess I've worked with this county and the city long enough to know that really typically don't like to, honestly, you don't like to do joint hearings if you can help it anyway. I know, I've worked with you before. So bottom line is I would anticipate you're probably going to do one with the planning commissions and one with the elected boards. You do have to do it that way, at least. So
So our first public hearing, would that be a joint meeting like this is, or would it be a
Yes.
separate meeting with the county have theirs and then the city
no,
have
it would
theirs?
have to be a joint one
Be a
like
joint
this.
meeting together.
Got to meet jointly. Yep. And the reading itself can be on its own. When we go to the elected boards, the reading can be on its own, but the hearing has to be together again.
So just keep that in amount in the back of your minds. The county has a 14-day publication notice and the city does not. So whenever we decide to do this,
Mm-hmm.
we have to get coordinated with our dates, correct?
Yep. Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
Yep, that's right.
And it would probably be in June with the spring season coming up, just unless you think you could squeeze out a May meeting for a public hearing like this. I'm just saying the public hearing would probably be the first part of June.
My advice is to plan a separate night from a regular
Yes.
meeting.
It would not be held on a regular first Tuesday of the month zoning meetings.
I have a question then as relates to Mike's position that maybe we could go right to public hearing, since we have to come back after public hearing and do a recommendation anyway, right?
No, you can make the recommendation at the meeting of the public hearing.
We can do that at the public
Yeah,
hearing.
yeah. That would be at that. And it's expected to be that, I guess. Typically, it's built in that way.
So my question is, okay, I've been on boards with everybody here, so you know how it is. You know, when I see that in writing, there are going to be some things that really probably don't make a whole lot of difference to the board, but I look at it and I think, well, you know what? This is ambiguous and it's going to cause litigation, and I'd like to tell Luke to maybe just word it a little bit differently than that. At what point do we have that conversation? Can I just send you things in writing, and then it could be included in an update, and can Luke update, or do we need to have a meeting to make that kind of small wording changes?
I guess I would leave that up to all of you
That's what I'm
as
asking.
far as how you want,
Yep,
how you want that done.
sorry. But sometimes when you've been writing and writing and writing something, there might be a hole that
Yeah.
you didn't see.
Yep.
We haven't seen any of that yet.
I guess, Leanne, my opinion would be if it doesn't change the intent and it's just minor verbiage changes, that I'm not opposed to these.
I will admit that I would rather that it funnel through staff and then to me. This is substantive and it isn't.
Yep.
And then the one thing I will say is that I've gone to this, I've gone to a method where, I'll typically, and obviously you gotta run it by your attorney to make sure it's okay, but that there's always an amendment that would allow, typos, grammatical, formatting errors, and, like numbering to be fixed after the action, and any that would not affect the actual ordinance itself. So, I mean, that in and of itself, and I typically ask the boards to make a point of making an amendment to allow that at the meeting, and so I don't want you to be surprised by that, because I've thrown that on a few boards before, and they go, what are you doing? That I think you almost have to do that, because when you go to a clean copy, inevitably you're going to go, oh, there was a space before that S, you know, or there was a comma here that shouldn't be here, you know. So just,
I meant to say cows, but it says horses.
yeah, exactly, you know, so,
And we could run that past, once you get the final draft, we can run that to our state's attorney and have him review it also.
yeah,
for-
exactly, yeah. So with that, I will, I'll have to get it to you before next Wednesday. Otherwise, you won't see it for 3 weeks. So, yeah, it'll be coming here inside of a couple of days.
Pressure on you.
I know, right? That's it for me.
And then we are gonna go with the. All right.
And work with your staff and chair on the what if needed means. I'm going to write it on there, and I'm going to be pleasantly surprised if we're not coming.
It'll be up to staff and chairs, and whoever wants the clarification.
Just a quick note for our board, our April meeting is at 8 p.m., so we change in April, so.
No. Goes to coffee in town, so you know what's going on, aren't you?
That's coffee.
Uh-huh. Is there a motion to adjourn on the county side? Motion by Diedrich,
Second.
second by Bartley. Meeting adjourned.